The Watchers is a new horror film, and it's the directorial debut of Ishana Night Shyamalan, who's the daughter of horror legend M. Night Shyamalan, who's known for his tense, eerie, and psychological horror movies, usually with a twist at the end. Ishana Night Shyamalan was second unit director on her father's films Old and Knock at the Cabin, both kind of closed-off films made during the pandemic, and now she's directing her own feature, The Watchers, which also feels like a closed-off movie with a mostly singular set, which could have been shot during a pandemic, but I digress. The Watchers is really not good, and thankfully I went into this kind of blind, so I was really ready for anything. It to me feels like one of those original horror movies made for a streaming service where you have these great looking sets and glossy shots and an intriguing premise, but it doesn't really amount to anything other than that. So the appeal of M. Night's movies is how they subvert typical horror movies. His films are not directly scary, at least they aren't now, they used to be with Sixth Sense. They usually aren't monster films like Alien or slashers like Halloween. There's a lot of dread built up in an eerie sense of suspense that lingers throughout his movies. He has this really great way of shooting his films too that's always interesting to look at, with a symmetrical framing and this clinical cold blocking. He's made some really great films like Split, The Visit, or The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and even some really silly ones like Lady in the Water, Old, or Knock at the Cabin. But his films still have this creepy style that's on display here. His daughter's new film, which M. Night produces, is very similar to his worst movies, and I want to break down that today. How you could take a premise that seemingly has all the promise in the world and potential as a horror movie, and how to fail miserably doing that. The Watchers follows Dakota Fanning's Mina, who's estranged from her family and works at a pet store in Ireland, where she's tasked with delivering this expensive bird to an unknown buyer. She drives through the Irish countryside to get to this place, but soon her cell phone signal goes out and her car breaks down, and she finds herself in the middle of the forest that's unlike anything else. Mina soon finds herself being stalked by these creatures in the woods, but an old lady named Madeline invites her into a house in the woods where she finds she lives with two other people named Kira and Daniel, who all stare at a one-way glass mirror, which is also a window where these creatures supposedly gather outside and watch them. And the idea is creepy. This is doubled by two things: the fact that we've never met any of these people, so we're very much in Mina's shoes in this fish out of water story. Stories of people being trapped in unfamiliar territories is inherently unsettling, as they're forced to survive in a place unlike what they're used to. We take on her perspective as she joins these three strangers, who insist she stares at the glass in hopes that she pleases the Watchers outside. And what's also scary about this is we don't know what is watching them, if it's real, or if these people are just crazy. Kind of like in 10 Cloverfield Lane, but the difference between those films is the tonal consistency and character dynamics. See, 10 Cloverfield Lane has a really tight approach that blends a monster film with a tight claustrophobic thriller, and as a result, it really worked. I love that film, not just because it manages to keep you in the dark about what's really happening, but it builds up such suspense in doing so. You truly feel afraid of John Goodman's character in that film. You truly feel like the environment is not safe, and the entire location feels fleshed out. This is the problem with The Watchers. This movie doesn't have that. It feels a bit more abstract. The location they are in eventually gets more fleshed out, but until later on, there's real no sense of geography or what's at stake. They mention how they hunt for food to survive in the woods, but we never really see them starving or needing to hunt to live. We never even really see why these three people came to this house in the first place, to come to the woods and stare at this window, and it's never really shown, just told to us. Whereas with 10 Cloverfield Lane, we watch these characters bond almost entirely in this closed space for the whole movie, and we learn about them in doing so. In 10 Cloverfield Lane, only important things that we don't need to know are told to us, but all of it is shown to us. The only things they tell us in 10 Cloverfield Lane are creepy things that might be suggestions, like, is the main guy a kidnapper? Did he have a daughter? All that stuff is great to tell, because if you showed it, you would give away the twist and the ending, which 10 Cloverfield Lane kind of does show that this guy is a kidnapper, and there are monsters outside. It's really satisfying because it gives you that creepy thing that was building up, and then it gives you something else on top of that. 10 Cloverfield Lane just really works from the writing, from the way they shot it. It feels like these are real characters, but in this movie, everything's just exposition we're told. And in 10 Cloverfield Lane, it was better. You saw board games they play. You saw them bonding and doing small things that weren't directly related to the plot, like making dinner, like playing little guessing games, like trying to escape or create a hazmat suit. These are small things that build up to bigger things. I will give the Watchers some credit early on. This great scene where one morning Dakota Johnson's character just leaves the house, and it's a smart character move. She thinks these people are crazy for staring at glass and decides to make a run for it. But when she notices she can't actually leave, she's forced to stay, and the movie continues. I did like that. It felt realistic. with her learning the rules of the house, with her learning that during the day the Watchers stay underground in these burrows, with her slowly acclimating to surviving here. But there's just one big gaping hole in the story and a key problem that causes the movie to crash and burn, and it's the fact that there's no drive. Mina has no desire to leave. She has no desire to learn more about this place. The actual place she's staying at is very vague and abstract. It's just some house in the woods with a giant glass window that these characters stare at. We don't have a reason to fear this place, or the Watchers who come to supposedly watch them every night. The movie, for being a horror film, is definitely not as scary as it could be. The characters don't have much depth to them at all. For example, Kira, Madeline, and Daniel, everyone who lives in this house, don't feel like real characters. We don't even see them as people. They're just here to serve the story and explain how they got there and try to help Mina survive. They're like these side characters you meet in video games who help explain this part of the game to you or help you beat the level. They don't feel like they have any backstory of their own, which hurts the movie a lot because it makes everything there is to look forward to about this place, or how it got here, or why they're even staying in this place in the woods, not worth investing in. And on top of that, there's just so many plot holes, many of which have been pointed out, such as the fact that there's a secret vault hidden under a rug, which for some reason in their 8 months staying in this house, no one notices. Or the fact that there's a boat to escape nearby in the woods, yet the oldest of the bunch, Madeline, who's been here the longest, knew about it and doesn't even attempt to reach it, even though she's been trying to escape for years. There's this part where they discover old video logs of the professor who lived in the house previously, and he reveals he had 13 people build his house a day, and then we killed all of them to sacrifice them to the Watchers. Like, how the fuck does one do that? That's some building the Batcave type shit, and it's just crazy. It's such a reach, like killing 13 people who like helped you build your house. Like, and why even explain that? Like, that just makes no sense. And also on top of that, the whole lore of the story, the idea of the Watchers, what they are, the mystery of them gets flattened, squashed, and ruined by this obtuse story. There's so much exposition, so much explaining how the Watchers came to be, that it takes away the mystery and the lore that's there in the first place. 10 Cloverfield Lane does this, but it does it really well. It keeps the true monster a mystery until the very end, but in the meantime, we've had all this build-up in suspense and a pretty solid monster in John Goodman's Howard, who may or not be crazy. But it's a fact he is a murderer, and we learn later on he's actually kidnapped girls and pretended they're his daughter, who was taken away from him. And on top of this, there's a twist where we learn our characters actually are in the middle of an alien invasion. But this element that came before it still matters. It still functioned at putting our characters in danger because they didn't trust each other and because one of them was really a monster too. The Watchers fails abysmally when you compare them. It has endless exposition, which leaves you not so intrigued because you kind of find out what the Watchers are right away. They're supposed to be these fallen angels or something, that they have somehow come through a door in the ground, which we never even see why it opened in the first place, and now can duplicate people, and for some reason they only live in the woods. Also, it's explained that the Watchers can have babies with humans too, but we don't really see an example of this. We don't get some cool twist where it turns out the main character, Mina, might actually be a Watcher. Maybe her mom was a Watcher and her dad was a human. But we don't get this ending. We just get these awkwardly paced reveals where we learn the Madeline character was dead 20 years ago, and the character we've been with actually is a Watcher taking on her form. I think this twist could work, but because the movie's so broken, it doesn't really matter. As a movie like 10 Cloverfield Lane does work, it makes you think, oh shit, that's actually creepy. Like I said earlier, the characters in the movie have no depth. We don't know much about Madeline, or Kira, or Daniel at all. We barely get tension with them when they're in this house together, and you'd think this would be a perfect place to build tension. The big issue is it doesn't feel real. If you're gonna make a movie about these people who are trapped in this house and supposedly have to ritualistically stand and watch the windows all night so these unseen monsters can observe them, at least make it work in the context of the movie. You can't just have one scene of Dakota Fanning running away before giving up. Build on that. Have her slowly learn not to trust Kira or Daniel. Or have Madeline have her own agenda. Have them all feel more real and human. When they just go around explaining the rules of the movie and saying, oh, this place used to belong to the professor, the Watchers come here every night. It gives a vague sense of forewarning, but it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like it actually could happen. It doesn't have any depth or plot you can latch onto. It's all just surface level and forced. It's like you can see the puppeteer pulling the strings. It's too obvious and doesn't flow smoothly. To make a good horror movie, you need the situation to feel real. You need to feel like these four people who are all very uncomfortable being around each other. You need to give each of them a purpose and a reason. Because Mina seemingly acclimates to this group right away, all the tension's kind of lost. They hint that Daniel might have some kind of issues, but don't really go too much into depth with that. Key issue is the characters feel very flat and boring. When you have flat and boring characters, your movie won't be good. The Watchers is very much a style over substance movie. It has some great ideas and concepts and good looking shots, but they don't really build up to anything. It just kind of teases you and doesn't properly build on that suspense. If you're going to make a horror movie, you need to leave the audience waiting. Don't spill all your juicy details right away. This movie is always telling a story or explaining the lore and legend surrounding this place in the woods. Or, oh, they call him the professor. Why? Why do they call him the professor? There's the old lady Madeline who's always explaining so much of the rules and the legend surrounding this house in the woods. And it's always leaving you wondering, how does she know all this and why? And not only that, the way she explains everything is just downright distracting. It's like you're being told to follow these rules. You're being told something, you're not going to get it as much. You need to have this shown to you. So at the end of the day, guys, The Watchers is just a really bad movie, but I think it just suffers from the biggest case of show, don't tell. It tells you everything good instead of showing it. And if it did show it, or found a proper way to adapt these creepy moments into a movie, and I get it, it's a book, it's probably harder to pick and choose these different things and put them in an order that's gonna tell the story, but also do it right. But at the end of the day, because it doesn't show and it only tells, it just feels terrible. So guys, hope you learned something. Let me know if you saw The Watchers, what you thought of it. Maybe some of you liked it, but let me know what you guys think. See you in the next one, guys.